Headlines make fans of Zack Snyder's films out to be toxic people who exude reprehensible behavior and have set a dangerous precedent for the film industry. But that just hasn't been my experience.
It's sometimes hard to really enjoy these Zack Snyder DC films because they get crapped on a lot. So it's fun to be around other like-minded people who love these films. They're all people of high quality taste in film.
I've found that fans of Snyder's work can be thoughtful and insightful, and chatting with them provides me with different perspectives that elevate my own personal viewing of the stories. Since I've already shared why I love the cinematic style of Zack Snyder, I wanted to highlight other fans to hear what they love about the work of the visionary filmmaker. Dave, I have actually been following you for a long time on YouTube. You probably didn't know it. I was a lurker for a long time. But I have been subscribed to your YouTube channel for I don't know how long, but way before Justice League 2017. I remember probably from the BVS days. So I've been a huge fan of yours for quite some time. So it was a real delight to start to get to know you at the Full Circle event. And then I've been on some of your vodka streams, had a ton of fun with y'all. So I am really excited to talk to you about all things film and all things Snyder and some of the stuff that you do. And so one of the things I wanted to start with is that you are Dave the Film Junkee.
Yes,
and I was curious, what got you into film? Where did your love of film start? Do you remember the first film you saw or a film that impacted you?
Oof. I mean, if I had to choose one, or well, even choose two, I would say Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. When I think about those, I mean, I was born in 1983, and I think Ghostbusters came out in 84. I think a year later. I don't know. Obviously, I don't remember. Like, I didn't go to the movie theater for that one, but when I watched it, I fell in love with obviously those characters and that concept. And then, of course, when Back to the Future came out, and even the whole trilogy. There was one thing that I always loved when it came to, after watching a movie when I was a kid, was reenacting scenes and wanting to, hey, you know, Marty's wearing this cool jacket in Back to the Future Part 2. I want that jacket. I want that hat. And it's kind of funny too, because as I'm saying that right now, you know, his rainbow hat that he has in
Yes.
Back to the Future 2, it's literally sitting like right there. Like I have,
That's awesome.
yeah, I have like a version of it now as an adult, and I wanted that hat so badly when I was a kid. But I think it's just, that's where I just kind of fell in love with just as a kid, and just the escapism and trying to relate to these characters. And then even as a kid too, trying to figure out exactly like how does it, I mean, when you're a kid, you think, oh yeah, when they film these movies, it doesn't take that long, right? You know, but there would be times where I'm like, oh, I think like right here, that was a different day. And I was big time wrong, because, you know, obviously there's the way to make a movie. I mean, there's so many, you know, now that we know how the process is and how hard it can be. But yeah, I think I was always just loved those kind of stories. And, you know, I had like a love and fear of horror movies as well, that I can remember too, where I was afraid of certain movies, but they intrigued me for some reason. I don't know why. It was just like, oh, I wanted to just torture myself as a kid and give myself nightmares. I felt sorry for my parents because I had night terrors as a kid. And when I'd watch some of these movies, whoa, man, it was a night for them for sure. I didn't remember anything, but so I think it's just, I don't know. It's just, there was just something that always drew me to that. And I loved reenacting scenes with my brother or my friends. And yeah, it just stuck with me.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think we're of the same generation. And
Yeah.
what's interesting to me, you mentioned Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, which is also one of my favorite trilogy and trilogies. And Ghostbusters, obviously, the first one is amazing. I mean, the second one's pretty good too. I like the second one.
I have love for it.
Yeah, I haven't kept up with the entire franchise, so I can't speak to every Ghostbusters movie that came after that. I did watch the one with Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig and all
yeah,
that, which started out okay, and then it kind of got weird at the end.
I thought the first 20 minutes were good if there wasn't a Ghostbusters movie. Like I was, because I love them. I love Melissa McCarthy. I love Kristen Wiig.
Yep.
you know, they're great, and it was great for that. But then when it started getting into the Ghostbusters stuff, I went, "Oh, what are we doing here? This is not." It started really not working, and then Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was like a haunted parade balloon, and Slimer was and Mrs. I don't know. It just got a little wonky after they started going. I went, "Nah, I'm out. This is not for me."
Yeah, so that movie is kind of the last
Okay.
Ghostbusters that I watched. Although I remember watching the Ghostbusters animated cartoon.
Oh yeah.
Also around that time, Back to the Future also had an animated cartoon.
That's true. And
And
there was also some Happy Meal toys that I remember
yeah.
having too, and one of my dogs destroyed one, and I
Oh
was
no.
upset about that. A couple
Yeah.
of them actually, yeah. You know, it happens. Can't leave those out. You can't leave those out when you have a dog.
Yeah, so those movies, I'm curious what your answer might be to this.
Okay.
Those movies in the 80s were incredible. Some of
Yeah.
my favorite movies come from the 1980s, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on why do you think the movies of the 80s were so good?
When it came to the 80s, there was just so much creativity and trying to, I mean, yeah, you could watch something right now and be like, "Oh my god, look at the visual effects on this." But then there's a lot of things too. Like even recently, yesterday, I just watched Beetlejuice again because I watched, you know, obviously the new one, and it seems to be that's the running thing that I'm doing this year is, you know, everybody always goes, "Yeah, you got to prep for the new version that comes out." I do the opposite. I watch the new version and then I go back and do a rewatch. And it's kind of fun. So I just do like the reverse idea, I guess you could say. And watching Beetlejuice, the first one again, and it's just, I don't know. I think there's just a lot more thought going into it because sometimes you hear from, you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts and people that are in the business, and sometimes they could just be like, "Oh, we'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post." Well, there's a lot of not of fixing and that a lot of that in post now. You can't really do that. And I think there's just a lot more. I don't know, when it came to the 80s, like the 70s started leading up to it, but I think when it came to the 80s, there was just a lot more creativity that was there, and the technology was growing, and there was like it was just like this point in cinema where things were just getting better and the creativity was getting better, and there was just a lot of adventure. And you know, being us that we grew up in that era and watching those movies, it was just, I don't know, there was just something that very nostalgic about it, and the fact that it was just that time where there's just a lot of adventure movies out there that really pushed cinema to where it is now.
You mentioned Beetlejuice. I'm a huge Tim Burton fan, and
Yeah.
so I've tried to work through all of Tim Burton's filmography, and his movies, you know, tend to skew on the weirder side of things.
A little
And
bit.
it's so fascinating to me that somebody was like, "Yeah, Beetlejuice, we're gonna green light that," because like,
I was thinking about that last night when I was watching, and I'm like, how did this movie even get greenlit? Because it is so weird, but I can kind of understand it in a bit because again, going back to the creativity thing, when you're talking about the afterlife and the way that he shows it and the way that they it's not just like, okay, it's this. No, they like kind of break it down of like, okay, this is when you die, you go to this place where you literally have to take a number to talk to a caseworker. And it's very much like how reality is, but in that paranormal way. And it's kind of, it's interesting because watching the newer one, have you watched the newer one
I
yet?
haven't yet. It's
Okay,
on my
I won't say anything like spoiler, but I'll just say this: like, you know, revisiting that world, there's more of that world, and I appreciated that part of the movie. But at the same time, like when it was back in the 80s, I don't know, it's just, I think it worked better than it would now, because obviously now when you think about how things are now, it's obviously a lot different with technology and everything. And back then it was just like, well, it's the 80s, so so you had like limited technology, and so it was represented there. So when you try to bring it to now, it can lose a little bit. It's not, it doesn't feel the same, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, how do they, I mean, like, who pitched this idea? There's a demon called Beetlejuice. Like that's the name in and of itself doesn't even, like, if you're bringing that to a pitch meeting, I was like, oh yeah, he's a demon for hire. He'll do he'll possess people, and he'll show up and try to haunt houses. And it's such a crazy concept, but it works so well.
Yeah, I think that's part of what made the '80s movies so great is that
Yeah,
they took chances on those those strange
totally did.
concepts.
Not
And
everything worked, trust me.
yeah. But they tried new things, and
Yeah.
some things were successful and some weren't, but they at least tried things. So yeah, the movies from the '80s just are just so good for me. So that's really cool. Well, I'm curious because I can tell by watching your live streams and your videos that you have a lot of video editing experience, because I am myself a video editor who's probably been doing it for 20 plus years, maybe 22 years. So
Mhm.
I can tell when somebody has a lot of skill in that arena. So I'm curious to find out what your background is. So you're a kid growing up, you're loving Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. How do you get to the point where you're like, I want to shoot my own stuff and learn how to edit? How does that happen?
Back like when I was in high school, me and my friends, I mean, this is back. I mean, this is maybe even before yeah, no, it was high school. So we're talking about 2000, 2001. We started, especially me and one of my really good friends, Kyle, we wanted to make sketches. We thought, we love Saturday Night Live and In Living Color and all that stuff, all like the sketch shows, Mad TV. And so we started doing it. We started doing like sketch stuff. And then, of course, there was nothing when it comes to editing. It was basically just like, hey, we have 2 VCRs. Maybe we could do something with that. But then in my senior year of high school, I was like, I'm taking video production. There was an option for an elective that was video production. And so actually that was junior year. I took that, and it was kind of like, I didn't really like the teacher. I don't even remember what his name was. And then of course he grouped us into like these groups, and the dude that was leading our group was basically like the guy. And I just was like, well, I'll just be the funny guy. Whatever you want me to do, I'll just do it. And I did that. But then I didn't really do any of the behind the scenes stuff besides just work with him and collaborate with him. But then when it came to my senior year, there was advanced video production, and they got a new teacher who it was funny enough because the guy who took over, his name was Mr. Johnson. He was one of my favorite teachers in high school because he was a substitute teacher for a while. And he was a substitute teacher when I was in middle school as well. And I thought he was funny. He was just a funny dude. And I remember one time when we were in middle school, a fight happened during lunch, and he literally stopped and go, well, tell me about this fight. And he sat on the desk and wanted everybody to talk about their point of views of like what they saw when a fight happened. And I'm like, I like this guy. So then he went and became the video production first he was a history teacher, and then he took over video production. So I was like, Mr. Johnson's doing that? Well, hell yeah. So I took it, and we really got along together. And then when I started making my own stuff, they had like an editing bay, like an old school editing bay where it was like monitors, and they had a whole control system and everything. And when he taught me how to do it, I just instantly fell in love with it, like, in and out and doing all that. And the way you had the second monitor that was showing you the edit before, and it was just, I fell in love with it, where I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. Like, this is so freaking cool that this is how editing works. I didn't know exactly the ins and outs. So, and then of course, when after high school and when years went by where, we can actually download something now. And one of my really good friends who was very good with technology, very smart dude, he downloaded like an editor. So we started making little short films after high school. But the first thing that we did, which when I was doing video production, the first thing I did was we did a parody movie called Kung Fu-y. Where it was just like I was like a Bruce Lee character, and I wanted to do the voiceover and the sound effects and do all the editing and stuff. And it was cool because I did all the voices and everything. And it was kind of funny because there was a movie called Kung Pao that came out, and I got inspired from that. Have you ever heard of that movie, Kung Pao?
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, Kung Pao Enter the Fist. And I was like, hey, we should do something like that. And so I did. And me and my friend, we recorded all the audio because he was very good with all that technology stuff, but we couldn't figure out how to put it onto the actual video. And it was such a process, and I was like, all right, I'll just take it into early. I'll get up early and go, and Mr. Johnson will be there and we'll do it, and we'll just put the audio on top of the video. And I remember he was sitting there watching it and laughing his ass off. Like, it was like, wow. And then he told me for like the next 3-4 years after he was teaching that class, he would show my film to his class, so I was like, well, that's cool, because we kept in touch for a little bit after that, and he'd always say like, yeah, I always show your film. So after that, it was just like, yeah, when it came to having on the computer, it was just like, okay, yeah, you could do it here. And yeah, to this day, and I use Adobe Premiere and try to utilize what I can. And then yeah, it's just there's just something fun where one of the things I love, especially when it comes to doing like a YouTube short or something, or a clip, is just like, all right, if I could take this topic, how do I condense it down to less than a minute? And that's always like the challenge. Even when it's like from the Vodka stream, there's multiple people talking, or when Scott and I do DC Fandom, it's like going back and forth and then showing different things. I don't know. There's just always something fun about it. And yeah, so basically I learned back in high school, and then it just stuck with me till now.
That is a good backstory that I think people can learn some things from,
Yeah.
because you sort of talked about tape to tape editing, which I was using in college
Yeah.
around that same time, and boy, was that difficult.
Not easy. Not easy at
If
all.
you screwed up, you would have to re-rack that thing and
Yep.
get it to send to the other monitor in the other deck, and it would
Uh-huh.
be in real time. So there was no Control Z or Command Z
Nope.
to undo that thing. And so I always find camaraderie with people who have done tape to tape editing, because the struggle.
Exactly.
It is real. So that's actually really fun for me to
Yeah.
know you, Dave, because I don't know a lot of people who have that same
I
experience.
don't either. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I tried to make a documentary film when I was in college. I took a documentary film class, and I still want to make a documentary film at some point in my future. I have some
Me too.
ideas, but
I'm
I
with
don't
you.
I
I do
don't know
too.
if it'll
Yeah.
happen. But yeah, that was something. That was the first thing I think I edited on Final Cut Pro back in the day.
Oh
A
yeah,
very
Final. Good old Final
version,
Cut. Oh,
old version of Final Cut.
I've dealt with those early versions of Final Cut. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on Premiere Pro as well, and
Yeah.
I find that to be a very helpful program. But the thing that I think is important for anybody who wants to edit video is that a lot of things, as long as you know those basic rules of editing, you can basically use any editor. And even those tape to tape editors that I used in college, and then for my first real big news job, I worked in local TV news. We had to do that just because it was mostly faster and cheaper
Yeah.
than anything. And so those basic rules of setting your in and setting your out, all that stuff was there in the tape to tape editing system. And so now when you translate it to nonlinear, it's basically the same thing, just a different way of doing it. So
Mhm.
I think that's awesome that you had a class, you had a teacher in high school who's showing you how to
Totally.
do that. Man, I wish I had had that in high school. I had to wait until I was in college before I even got to explore what that was like. I even oh my gosh, what was that old video system I used? Media 100. I think it was this really old video editing
Sounds like
nonlinear
it is.
software. Oh my gosh, it probably doesn't exist anymore. But that was that was the first nonlinear editing software that I used. I made a music video
Yeah.
on
Oh,
Media
wow.
100. It was
I've actually
very,
made a I've
very
made a
old.
I made a music video myself one time. There was like it was like back in 2008, I want to say 2007, maybe in 2006. I don't know. You remember like Rock Band and Guitar
Oh
Hero?
yeah.
Yeah. So Pepsi was holding out a competition of like for Rock Band, because that was like all the rage, like in 2006, 2007. And it was basically like, make a music video on one of the songs, and they had the list of songs, and it shows and the band should be playing all the Rock Band stuff. And me and three of my friends just went out to the desert and shot this pretty elaborate music video, and it was so much fun. It wasn't fun the day of because it was in the desert and it was hot, but it turned out like really well, and it was just like wow, like to edit a music video in this in that kind of style. It was a lot of fun to. And that was the only time I ever did a music video, but it was like because even back as a child, like when I was watching movies, music videos were all the rage too, and some of them were like movies,
Oh yeah.
So, and especially the Michael Jackson ones, Jesus Christ, it was like you had Scorsese directing Bad for God's sake. So it was just, it was just kind of cool to dip my toe into that kind of thing. But it was like it was pretty, pretty elaborate for the time. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, that is awesome. I would love to see it if you still have it somewhere.
I'll send you the link.
Okay, yeah.
It's somewhere on YouTube, but I haven't really told people where it's at. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I won't share it. I'll
Okay.
just I want to watch it because
One of these days I'll fully share it. But yeah.
That's great. Well, maybe one day we can collaborate. I know we're on
Yes. I'm down for
opposite
that.
ends of the country, but I think that would be really fun to try
Yeah.
to make something wholly original and do something cool. So
I'm down
maybe
for
we
that.
can find a way to do that. Okay, so we got your backstory and kind of what got you into being a video editor, video content creator, and so now I'm curious about Zack Snyder films. You
Okay.
you told me about how you got into films and what you like about and having the experience of doing those things yourself. So, what is it that draws you to the filmography of Zack Snyder?
I've seen all but the Owl movie in the movie theater. That's funny. It's like that one. I always forget. I always mess up the name of.
Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of
Yeah,
Ga'Hoole, I think
there
is.
you go. There
Yes.
it is. That was the only one I did not see in the movie theater. But after I saw Dawn of the Dead, and that movie, blew me away because I saw the original and I was a fan of like the George Romero zombie films. And but of course it's just and then of course Shaun of the Dead came out in like 2002, I think, or 2003. And that was like my favorite zombie film because it injected like this comedy to it. But for the most part, it was just it's the zombies that are just slow moving. And yeah, it's freaky. But then I think within the same year, you had 28 Days Later and Dawn of the Dead come out, where the zombies were, hey, what if the zombies could run at full speed? That's frightening, And so with both of those movies, and then Zach taking on, but this is before I even knew who this guy was. I think it wasn't until 300 where it was like, who directed this? Zack Snyder. Okay. But I remember just walking out of Dawn of the Dead, just going, wow. Like me and my friends were like, just like, geez, could you imagine that? Zombies were freaky before, but if they could run at full speed, that's insane. And the way that he shot it and the way that it all played out and the way that he updated that original, because, the original is the original, but if I'm going to put on Dawn of the Dead, I'm going to put on Zach's version. That's just my choice right there. But then when 300 came out, I remember that was all within like my friend group and everything. Let's face it. It's dripping with testosterone. So naturally, you got, I'm 20 something. We're all 20 somethings, and we see that. And some of my friends were like, yeah, let's, and it was just like, wow, who is this guy? Who's this director? And I think that's when I first started. I saw the name and I was like, oh, it's the guy who did Dawn of the Dead. That's crazy. And then of course, when Watchmen came out, that was another thing too, because I wasn't too familiar with Watchmen. And then seeing that and just kind of going, oh, wow, this guy is on to something. And then Sucker Punch, that blew me away. And then when I think I really started getting into where it's like Zack Snyder is no joke. This guy is no joke. Is obviously when I started doing my YouTube channel, that was like right up to where Man of Steel was about to be filmed. When I started my YouTube channel, I remember I think the second video I ever did, and I was just talking about movie news. I talked about this, about the casting of Man of Steel and Superman being Henry Cavill, because we had no idea how to say his name at first because he was so fresh. And it was just, so then I remember that's where I started really, when it came to Man of Steel and loving Man of Steel. And of course, when Batman vs. Superman came out and that announcement happened at Comic-Con, I immediately was like, all right, I am 100% covering everything about this. He's bringing in Batman now. with this Superman. Oh, this is going to be great. And yeah, that's where I really started diving into. But yeah, I would say 300 is when I really started going, all right, this Zack Snyder guy knows how to make a movie here. What are we doing? Yeah. And people are still trying to emulate what he did in that movie. And for some reason, it just doesn't, when they try to do the slow motion into fast motion and everything, it's like, yeah, good attempt, but he just has that perfection, it's perfection.
Yeah, I think a lot of people dismiss Zack Snyder because they don't, obviously some people don't like his films,
I get
but
it.
but filmmakers, and you have an experience with video and editing and shooting things. I think the actual filmmakers, I think, look at his work very differently than the general public does. They see a cinematic language that he's developed with the way he shoots things.
Mhm.
And I do think a lot of people look at his stuff and admire it, because I can't imagine you wouldn't if you were a cinematographer or a video editor or a director
Well,
or an
no.
aspiring one. I mean, his
Yeah.
stuff is amazing.
That's what's so funny. It's like when people have this hate for him, like, and they can't stand his movies. I'm like, yeah, people like Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, I think even Ridley Scott has just talked about his cinematic language and how he's just so unique. And then, and then and we've had the luxury of talking to the guy, and he's like just a kid in a candy store, it seems like. And when you see behind the scenes, and you never hear anybody, there'll be times where it's just like you hear like a bad thing about, this director or working, or the disaster that happened behind the scenes here. You never hear anything about that with the Zack Snyder film, even though there's people out there that hope that they find something on him, which is very strange. But it's like, after actually have talked to the guy and listened to him during interviews and everything, he's just a kid in a candy store, and he just loves telling stories, and he's so detailed too. And that's what I love about Zach as well, is the fact that he's not going to just be like, yeah, so we have this character right here and he's just this way because I say so. No, he's going to go, all right, well, why is he this way? And I love the fact that Zach said this many times in like interviews and stuff. It's like the why of everything pretty much. And it's like, well, why does he want to do this in this story, and why this and why that? Let's create a Bible behind all of this, or a big time backstory. Even when it's DC stuff, he'll just be like, we could change this stuff, and he'll have a bunch of ideas, and they don't come to fruition all the time, but he's an idea person, and he's very much a collaborator. And I think we've seen that so many times when he's on stage doing a Q&A, or just behind the scenes, or during an interview, or even when we've talked to him. You just know that he's like a big time collaborator, and he likes to just talk about ideas.
Yeah, and I think that plays into how he shoots
Yep.
things, and his visuals, and the way his mind works visually. I think it plays into that.
I can
Um,
only imagine what his mind. I mean, I think I asked Debbie when I interviewed her on the Vodka stream a while before the Snyder Cut came out. I think I asked her, like, how do you deal with like the ideas just are shooting at his head? And she just goes, "You don't even know." I think she's so like, "You don't even know," and I think that's what's a great balance between them. Is she's the producer, he's the idea director, and she has to do this a couple sometimes where she has to slap the wrist, like, nope, you're going a little too far when it comes to stuff. I always say that I think their relationship's kind of represented in that scene in 300 where Leonidas, before he kicks the dude into the hole, he looks at his queen and is like, should I? And she gives him like the nod. And I always thought that's kind of like maybe what their relationship's like, where it's like, I have this idea, and he runs it by Debbie, and she goes, that might be a little bit too much. I don't know if we should go there, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think every filmmaker probably needs that kind of person.
Yes.
It makes me think of George Lucas during the prequels
Yep.
of Star Wars. He maybe could have used someone to tell him no occasionally. There was a conversation, I think, in some behind the scenes stuff
I think so. Yeah.
about how nobody would tell George no, and so it's like, I don't know, maybe somebody needs to tell you no every now and then.
Every
Um,
now and again, you need to be put in check for a little bit, I
I
think.
I feel like we probably all need someone like
Yeah.
that in our lives.
Indeed.
Well, speaking of Zach's movies and kind of going across the timeline there, let's take Man of Steel, BVS, and Zack Snyder's Justice League out. We're gonna take them out.
Okay.
What is your, and I know this is like picking favorite children, but what is your favorite of his non DC trilogy films?
I would say 300. There's something about 300 with the fact that it was made with small budget, but it looks so. And I remember when he was even on Joe Rogan, and I think he brought up the fact that how much it was, and Joe Rogan was like, "What? That's it?" Because it just looks so good. It's shot so well, and like I said, that's the movie that put him on the map. And he essentially just took that book and just said, we got to wrap flesh around it. And then the fact of like the ideas of like the camera rigs of like the zooming in with the slow motion and fast motion, how they had to create something, and the color palette and it's such a simple movie. It's not even a long movie. And I mean, when you think Zack Snyder, it's always, he wants to tell a long story and flesh it out and everything, which I love, but it's a short movie. The fact that he just basically had the book and just said, we're putting this on the screen, and he essentially did it. So I would say 300 is my favorite out of the non-DC movies.
Yeah, it's hard to beat the Zack Snyder Larry Fong combination.
True.
We've been blessed with that several times
Oh yeah.
throughout their careers. But I mean, truly, I know that this probably gets tossed around a little bit, but truly a visionary filmmaker. He created camera rigs to do something that had never been done before.
Yep.
So that is something that I admire. That it's like, oh, we have this idea. How do we make this work? So 300 really, I mean, it changed the game for a lot of things. The speed ramping, the camera rig, even the color grading and the
Oh
way
yeah.
that they matched the book, but also created such a visual style altogether. I mean, even in addition to it being based on a comic book and having a story that they were telling, the visuals of it just changed the way I think a lot of people thought about filmmaking. So 300 is a great pick. So that leads me to the DC trilogy: Man of
Okay.
Steel, BVS, Zack Snyder's Justice League. What's your favorite of those three?
Oh, you know which one it is. It's BVS, of course. When it comes to BVS, I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite just superhero movies in general. I mean, when that was announced, and it was announced so beautifully, obviously at Comic-Con with Harry Lennox reading off that passage from Dark Knight Returns, so beautiful. And that's why I was like, all right, I am covering this movie because this movie is going to be the greatest movie ever. And naturally, when it came to the theatrical cut, it was like I felt like, okay, loved it, but I was like, there's things missing here. You could just kind of feel it a little bit. And I remember I even made a video of like, man, what if like there was like this that added to this, and it was like one of those things where I was like, I still like the movie. I'm just saying, what if this? And then of course, when the ultimate cut came out, I went, oh, well, that resolved like 95% of what I was talking about. So I was like, well, yeah, what are we doing here? I'm like, okay, so there we go. And I think it's just because when you're in, I've had many conversations with people that just go, the movie was boring. It was this, it was that. I'm like, well, and then I start explaining, and then they'll start going, oh, I didn't think about it like that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. The deconstruction of these characters, I'm like, we get it. We want to see like the optimism in Superman and all this and everything. But it's like, well, but what Zach wanted, the why of like, why are they here? Why do they have to exist? It's like, if you stick Superman in the real world, he's not going to just be cheered and loved by everybody. There's going to be like half the people are going to hate him. It's just the way it is. There's going to be politics involved. And that's what I love about it. And then you have a Batman who's on the side of like, hey, this guy could just wipe us out. And what he says to Alfred, there's a 1% chance we got to take him out. So to take like the concept of Dark Knight Returns and just kind of put it into this world that has others, obviously Wonder Woman, and then of course they introduce all the, Flash, Cyborg, and Aquaman briefly. It's just a movie that just has so much, and there's a lot of great concepts that I think a lot of people need to give more of a chance to, I think. And I don't know, it's just, to me, for when it comes to the trilogy, it definitely is The Empire Strikes Back. It's a good bridge between, like, all right, here's Superman, and then Superman's going to come back here and save the day, but he's going to go through a lot of crap. He's going to die, for God's sakes. And you're going to see a Batman that is very much going, the world sucks. There's so many bad people out there. I don't even know if I care anymore, but I'm just going to start killing these guys, and I don't give a. And then you see his arc in Justice League, and all of a sudden he's telling Alfred, Faith, what? So there's just like so Batman vs Superman is just like that good bridge in between Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And yeah, it's just, like I said, it's one of my all-time just favorite superhero movies in general.
Yeah, same. And the character journeys that
Yes.
all the characters take, really, they did a very nice job weaving those throughout all of those three movies and getting them from one point, point A to point B. And obviously, Batman v Superman was not received well
Yeah.
by professional critics. We happen to love it.
Yeah.
But the Rotten Tomatoes folks didn't care for it too much.
Not really.
And since you are a film critic and I would say a film connoisseur, you're a junkie, but I would say
Yeah.
connoisseur is maybe
Yeah.
the professional term there. So what do you think? There's kind of a two-part question here, so
Okay.
I'll try to remind you if you
Yeah, that's fine.
forget one of the questions. I try not to ever ask like two-parters, but here
It's
we
okay.
go. So the first part would be, what do you think about film criticism today? And then number two, I guess the second part of that would be, how do you approach critiquing a film?
I grew up watching Siskel and Ebert. I used to watch them, and then of course when Siskel died, it was Roper and Ebert. So I used to watch them. It was like on Sundays because I just wanted to see what they had to say about it. Now, I never, when it came to critics, if critics were just going that this movie sucks, it never prevented me from going out to see the movie. Like, no matter what, I'm just going, okay, that's what that person said. I respect that, but I'm still going to make my own decision. I mean, nowadays, when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes, and a lot of people hate Rotten Tomatoes, and I get it. I totally get it, because I don't like the fact that when you open up Rotten Tomatoes, the first thing you see when you open up a movie, you see the percentage just right in your face. Like, that's automatically the first thing. So, and I have friends that have, like, when I say, hey, you want to go see this movie? And immediately they look at Rotten Tomatoes. Well, it's at a 42%. I'm like, so what? Stop it.
Yeah.
Like we let's just go see it. If you want to see it, see it. So I do hate that aspect, but I do like the fact that it does have, because I'll utilize Rotten Tomatoes for my shows when I want to read off just, hey, what are the critics saying about this movie that's coming out this week? And I'll read off those. I'll go down and look at, and I like the fact that it gives you a link to like their website or their full-on review. So it's cool that it is a hub for that. But I think nowadays, yeah, it's pretty crazy, because it used to just be like you read in a newspaper or watch Siskel and Ebert or Ebert and Roper once a week, and you kind of find out about film critics. Nowadays, it's like there is a lot of bias out there. I think a lot of people will go into things where it's just like, if they don't like Zack Snyder, they've already written that review of Rebel Moon. They already have that. They already know they're going in wanting to hate this movie. And they'll do that with other directors too. If they don't like James Gunn, they'll just do that. Or, even if they don't like Nolan or don't like Ridley Scott, they already have. And I think that shows sometimes when you see like this person's articles or whatever. It's like, yeah, you just don't like the person who's making this. You're not actually going in with just like, okay, hey, I just want to enjoy this movie. I don't care who's like a part of it. Just tell me the story, and that's all I want. I think there's too many people that go into movies where they already have a preconceived notion of what what this movie's going to be because of the director or who's in it or something. And there's a lot of like with social media, certain actors or actresses or anybody that's involved, they already go, well, this person sucks, so I'm already going to hate this movie. So there's a lot of that happens nowadays. And then you said, what if I go into a movie, like, what was the second question? Sorry.
Yeah, so that's why I try not to ask two-parters, but then I thought about the second question after I asked the first question. Well, when you go to see a movie, so you just talked about how like film critics, pretty much write their reviews. A lot of them, maybe not a lot of them. Some of them, a good handful of them probably write their reviews before they even see the movie. So I'm always kind of interested in how other people consume films. Like when you sit down to watch a film, are you judging it as you go? What's your criteria for it? How do you critique a film?
It's interesting because I'll give like because again, sometimes we do have to go, hey, you got to put your feelings aside already. It's like, yeah, this movie might suck, and because the trailer, just nothing's there. But at the same time, I always try to approach it like, okay, I'm going in with low. If I'm going in with low expectations, I'm really hoping that there's going to be something in a movie that's just going to be like, oh wow, okay, I went in with low expectations just from what I've seen and talked about. Like for instance, recently, The Crow remake. Let's face it, I'm a big fan of the Brandon Lee 1994 version. And when I saw what was happening with this one, I'm going, this one's not it. But I still was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. And I went in with open arms. But as I was sitting there, I was just going, I'm like, these choices here, but at the same time, this is something from a previous property. So if I'm going into a film where it just sounds like, oh, this sounds like a cool idea, I'm just like going, just tell me the story. And if I'm not sitting there looking at my watch or my phone, or something like that, where I'm seeing like how long we into this, if I'm just like totally engaged, I'm not yawning. I'm not sitting there just going, oh man, when are we getting to the final act here? I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be good. So I try not to go in. And then when I even do like my first reactions driving away from the theater, I don't try to just be like, don't go see this movie. It sucks. It's not worth your time. I don't like to tell people what to go see. I just go, this wasn't for me. Who's this for? Maybe this, maybe that. I try to always give that point of view where I'm like, this was not for me, but maybe it's for these kind of people that like these kind of movies or something like that. So that's kind of how I approach it when I go see a movie, where it's like, okay, if I walk out I didn't like it, wasn't for me. And I always try to emphasize that. I hate it when people just immediately just want to trash a movie and tell people not to go see it. It's like, no, I'm never going to tell anybody not to go see something if I don't like it. That's just not a way to do it,
Yeah, it's so funny how you mentioned your friends would be like, hey, the Rotten Tomatoes score is low, let's not go see it. I had a similar situation with a friend of mine like that a long time ago for the Jennifer Lawrence movie, where like she played the lady who she created something and sold it on QVC. I cannot remember the title of that movie, but we are big Jennifer Lawrence fans. And and my friend was like, oh, the reviewers didn't like it. And I was like, who cares? It's Jennifer Lawrence. We'll go see it. It looks interesting. So, and we enjoyed it. So it's one of those things where it's like, you can listen to somebody or read somebody's review, but ultimately it's kind of your decision to go see it. And then it's your decision on what you think about it when you leave the theater.
You can have fun, even if it's terrible, you could still kind of have fun with it too. And it's like, and that's the thing about these movies as well. It's like, yeah, something could just be not executed well at all, but you can still have fun discussing it and talking about those elements too, of like, what were they thinking? I mean, like I said, you see, even going back to the Crow movie, I said it just felt like somebody just took the idea of the Crow, the concept, put it in Chat GPT and made a script, it was just one of those things. But I remember, like, even with the Vodka stream, I like to, if like, okay, who's seen the movie? What were your thoughts? And then just having to, and then what's also fun about it too, is I could be talking with somebody, a friend or, a colleague or whatever the hell. And they could be talking to me too. And maybe they didn't like it. And I'll bring up something and they go, wow, I didn't think about it like that. Hey, there you go. So then they have maybe another appreciation for it. And then they want to watch it again. And I've had that happen to me numerous times too, where somebody has told me their point of view of what they thought when, because they actually liked it, maybe I didn't, and they said, well, look at it like this, and I was like, oh wow, didn't think about it like that. I'm gonna have to revisit it and put those goggles on that you just handed over to me, and then maybe I could find like an appreciation for it, which I have before, where I've watched the movie, didn't quite like what I watched when I saw it in the theater, rewatched it again at home after knowing what I'm in store for, and then maybe even talking to somebody else, and they gave me a different point of view, and I was just like, oh wow, I actually like this movie now. That's what's great about it.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what would make you rewatch a film, and it sounds like you answered that, but
Yeah, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah.
It
So
would probably be discussing with somebody, like whether we're on the Vodka stream and maybe you liked something and I didn't, and then you just brought up a like, well, I got this from it, and that's what I love, because that's what I love about the Vox stream and having the panel and having different voices. We all have our different voices and our different things that we do. So we can just say like, okay, this is what I thought about this particular thing. And then maybe I didn't think about it. And then I just go, oh, wow, I'll have to look at it this way while watching it again. And you could find some new love for a certain movie just because of that.
yeah, the vodka stream has me wanting to rewatch the Matrix movies because
See,
you
there you
loved
go.
them so much, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, Dave loves Matrix Reloaded. I'll have
Yeah.
to give it another shot,
Exactly.
just because I appreciate what Dave has to say about it.
Yeah.
Um, so this is a really big question, but it's kind of in the same vein of what we're talking about. I have been on a journey to answer this question for myself, and it's a very
Okay.
difficult question, very big. If you were to define what art was, what would you say it is?
Ooh, yeah, that's. I wish I could have some kind of philosophical, like, what is art? What
when,
is it?
when you describe art to people, like if somebody came up to you and said, "What is art, Dave?"
Yeah,
Uh,
I think
do you have something in mind?
I think my first thing is expression, I guess you could say, because it's so funny because art. I mean, I think when you just, at least for me, and I think a lot of people, when you hear the word art or even read it, immediately you just think of like a painting or something like that. But art is such, I mean, there can be art in so many different things. Like it's so broad, because there's always that saying, like, he turned this into an art form. I mean, for God's sake, you could even say like the guy who folds Domino's pizza boxes so quickly, and you see it in that commercial where he's like doing it. I was like, that's an art form. He created an art form with folding pizza boxes. It's crazy. Or somebody can look at a bunch of wood and be like, you know what? I could turn that into something, and they do. And then I love stand-up comedy. There's art in that where somebody can take an idea and make it funny and then make you look at it a different way. It's an art form. I don't know. It's so, but when it comes to film, obviously that's a big time art form. Storytelling, visuals, the cinematography, and I don't know. But I think it's just, if I were to say like one word, I always say it's expression, because you're taking essentially an idea, and then you're expressing how you feel about that idea, and you're making it physical, whether it's a painting or creating a coffee table in a certain way or a movie or whatever. I don't know. It's creativity, it's expression. Yeah, I just think it's a broad thing, and it's hard to really think about, like, but I would say that if somebody asked me that, my first word that comes to mind is just expression.
I like that idea of thinking about art in terms of taking your idea and making it come to life.
Yeah.
You're physically making something represent the idea that you have in your head. I think that's a really cool way to look at art. So thank you for helping me on my journey to figure out what is
I'm
art.
glad. Yeah.
It's a pretty
Glad to do
big
that.
loaded question. And the last thing I want to ask you about, so
Mhm.
we both have been in the Snyderverse fandom for quite a while, And we've been hit with the label of being toxic by various people on the interwebs and also Warner Brothers executives. Um, and so I was curious what you thought about that label and what your experience has been interacting with other Snyder fans.
Every fandom has toxicity in it. I mean, no matter what. Sadly, there are people out there that just they have this idea of what the thing that they love and grew up with should be. So it should be like that, but it's like it's never going to be like that. I mean, I always say that anytime that when they try to adapt a book into a movie or series and everybody goes, oh, the book was better. I'm like, the reason why that is because when you read it, you created your own movie. So now you're watching somebody else's movie that they created and you don't like it that much. And I'm like, yeah. So that's why I'm always like, yeah, of course the book's always better because you created the movie in your head as you were reading it. So, but yeah, so when it comes to the Snyder fandom, and I've had my fair dealings with the toxicity and I've been called toxic. It sucks because usually when it comes to any fandom that has toxicity in it, which is all of them, that the toxicity always gets amplified because it's always like a small part of the fandom, like especially the Snyder fandom, because look at how much has been accomplished when it comes to the Snyder fandom. With the releasing of the Snyder Cut and all the AFSP money that's been raised and all the campaigns and everything, there's been lives that have been saved. And Zack knows this and has talked about it. There's been so much that has been saved. But sadly, in this day and age, everybody likes to look at the negative so much that they'll always just amplify that. I mean, us being, voices and stuff like that. I mean, let's face it. Sometimes, you get a bunch of like glowing reviews of like your last stream or podcast or something like that. But then you get one, like somebody just says something bad. All of a sudden that one sticks with you. And you're like, for some reason, why is that always the one? You have to like put yourself in check. So when it comes to toxicity in like the Snyder fandom, it's like, yeah, there is that there. And I've dealt with them and they don't like me. There's some people that are just do not, if I push back against something or dare I say, like, oh yeah, this is not happening or that's not happening, they'll get rowdy. And it's definitely there and it sucks that it is. But I just would hope that when it comes to the Snyder fandom, that it's not known for the toxicity, that it's known for all the good that it's done. And yes, it's always going to be there, but it would just be nice, like if some of these like journalists and stuff like that, when they're writing some of these articles, that would really recognize all the good, that has been done in the Snyder fandom, and the fact that it's like Zack likes to interact with his fans. He does it all the time. And yeah, you might not like sometimes what they have to say and push out there and everything, but for the most part, it's like there's not. When it comes to toxicity, it's like, yeah, you just got to filter all that out. It's a small minority of the fandom, and there's just a lot of people that, yeah, and I get it. Sometimes, especially when it comes to the Snyder DC stuff, we're kind of done. That's in the rearview window. There's nothing wrong, and I always say this too, is like, there's nothing wrong with talking about that trilogy of movies, and even. I love the fact that there are people out there that are creating new stories and art and making some really cool stuff when it comes to continuing the Snyderverse story with spin-off stuff. I've seen, there's somebody called Mr. Vega Official that is on Instagram that is creating some 3D animations of things that would be in Justice League 2. There's people that are just making art and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, continue doing that. But, don't be upset if somebody's going, I don't think anything else is going to come from this live action. There's certain things that you guys are hoping for that might not be the case. But at the same time, it's like, still talk about it, still, do all this, say whatever you want to say, but, just don't get upset when people like push back against certain ideas that might not sound like that would actually happen. But like I said, I just would hope that the Snyder fandom that's going to be still around and still support Zack just realize, hey, we've done a lot of good stuff, a lot of money raised, lives were saved, and some good art was put out there.
Yes, some expression of ideas
There you
into
go.
the physical world was created. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have and to share, that that things are happening kind of in the inner circle of Snyder
Yeah,
fans. That sometimes we have to um, uh, be respectful of each other, I would say. And so I understand that sometimes too, when you have a comment on your YouTube channel and that one sticks out at you. That's definitely been the case with me as well. So I think, Dave, you're one of the good ones for
thank you. I
sure.
think you
I
are too.
I think you have done a lot to put out positivity regarding fandom in general, just being a fan of film.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think that not even just Zack Snyder films, but like just film, and I think sometimes I get lost in the analysis of it and wanting to dissect things, and not and forgetting to just enjoy a film, just to enjoy being in a world. And I think you're a good reminder that hey, just watch a film, watch a movie, and just enjoy it, get lost in something and have a good time. And so I really appreciate your perspective in fandom of film, because I think that's something that gets lost in some of these conversations sometimes.
It definitely does.
Um, so thank you for being a good representation of that. Thank you for your YouTube channel and your live streams and the community that you've built amongst your viewers. It's fun even when I'm not in the panel for the vodka live stream. Live stream. Yes. Oh,
Yeah, it is.
why did I think I said live? I feel like I said something wrong there.
Yeah, you're
I,
good.
I,
Yeah, you know, it happens. It happens.
I thought I said lime stream, but, but I
That could
meant
also be fun too. Put lime in the drink that I have.
a vodka lime stream.
There you
It
go.
sounds like
Yeah.
a totally different experience. But even when I'm not on the panel, sometimes I'll hop in the chat just to see what people are saying, and it looks like it's a really good community there. I remember seeing I had a memory pop up on my Facebook page of I had screenshotted something from one of your live chats where Andrew Dice had popped in there and said something really nice about me. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, good old Andrew Dice.
That's what's so great about doing that. And what I love about the Vodka stream is the fact that, like I said, different voices that are doing different things that come together. And I appreciate what you've done too, with Supergirl Radio and everything. And when I see your clips that you post on Twitter and everything, it's just great. The fact that we can build this community of different voices, and then we do these collaborations and have these discussions. And I think it's good. It's positive discussions, and that's the thing. It's not like we're just all getting together and, hey, we're going to just crap on this movie right here, and that's all we're going to do. It's like, no, we're going to talk about, and especially when it comes to future stuff. And that's what I love, like, when it comes to the future of DC and the DCU, I love getting your perspective, especially since we have a Supergirl movie coming out. And I always love, since you're like the expert on a lot of that, and I still need to read Woman of Tomorrow.
I still need to send it to you.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I was like, I'm waiting.
I'm going to.
You had a copy for me.
I have a copy. I promise you, that needs to just get in the mail.
Right.
I'm
getting antsy. I was like, maybe I should go get it, but
no, don't.
Okay.
I'm going to send it to you. I promise.
Right. I'm looking forward to it.
And you will have to send me a picture when it gets delivered, so I know
totally
when it's
will.
there.
I'll post it on Twitter, and I'll thank you, of course, too. I'll make sure that everybody knows that you sent it to me, and I'll make sure I'll read it and give it a review, and we'll even have discussions about that too.
That would be amazing. I would love to hear your perspective on it, because Woman of Tomorrow in particular has kind of an ending that was somewhat controversial. I'll say.
That's what you said before, and that's what makes me so intrigued by it. Too.
I'll be curious to hear how you interpret it, that story. But yeah, I'm really glad that we can have these conversations, and thank you for introducing me to so many new people that I've started following and have been interested in their perspectives and their thoughts. So I think you've done a really great job creating community and making people feel like they have a voice in their own fandom and their perspectives. So I think what you do is great on your platform, and I hope you continue to do it. And I hope one day maybe we can see a film directed by
Ooh,
you, maybe.
that
Maybe
would be sweet.
maybe Film Junkie, the film, I think
Yeah, right.
needs to have
Film Junkee Productions.
Yeah,
Something like that.
I would love to see, even if you did, like, a short film.
Yeah,
I
which
just
I
wanna
have, you know.
Oh, okay, alright.
Yeah, I have done, like, just little things, like, in past, which, I'll have to, like, one of these days upload some of the stuff that I've done. But yeah, I know I would like, yeah, no, it would be cool to do and like you even said earlier, like documentary stuff. You even thought about that, and I think you'd be perfect for like directing documentaries. Just from talking to you all these times, hopefully we'll see that come to fruition too, and that'd be sweet. You know.
Yeah, I think I just want to encourage you in that to maybe, if you have that idea, put it physically out into the world, because I would love to see it. And I'll try to do the same for myself, because I have a couple of ideas that I think are doable.
There you go.
But I have not done anything with those ideas yet. So I guess we can hold ourselves accountable in that way. So if you ever have an idea and you need some feedback, let me know.
Yep.
And maybe if I ever shoot a documentary film on my end, I'll send it to you and be like, give me your feedback, or help me edit this or something.
And that's what's good too. Feedback's always good, that's yeah, I know we're wrapping up right now, but I'm just saying, like, I always love when I get when somebody asks me for feedback. Don't I always tell you, even like when I ask for feedback, I'm like, don't be afraid, just say what you have to say. And sometimes maybe some people will get, oh man, I don't want to like say this thing because maybe they'll get upset or something like no, it's like there's always constructive criticism is fantastic. I remember somebody hit me up, said like, what do you think about this video and stuff? And I said, well, I think when we see you on camera, it feels like you're reading off something a little too much. Try to make it a little bit more of like you're talking, as opposed to just like being like a newscaster and reading off something like that. I was like, just a little, that's it for what I've seen, just a little bit of that or something like that. Constructive criticism is always good when it comes to this space.
Yeah, even minor adjustments can go
Yeah.
a long way. So
Oh,
yeah, I always welcome feedback. So if you ever have any constructive criticism to send my way,
Rebecca, I'm just
please.
kidding.
I will take it. I will take it.
No. Like I said, I love the background and everything like that. It's all good.
Well, thank you for hanging out with me and for sharing your thoughts on these questions. And thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
sharing your backstory. It was cool
No.
to learn more about you as Dave the person.